The maternal wall suggests an obstacle that stops women cold, and you can contrast that with the glass ceiling, which implies at least something that can be shattered. This line of research, also dubbed the motherhood penalty effect, it's inspired a whole new legal arena, so let's see why. Study after study shows that merely describing a business consultant as a mom leads evaluators to rate her as less competent than when she's described as child-free. No such penalty for fathers occurs. In fact, as we'll see, dads can get a bonus. Moreover, pregnant female managers are judged as less committed to their jobs, less dependable, and less authoritative, but warmer, more emotional, and more irrational than otherwise equal female managers who are not pregnant. So motherhood acts as a diffuse status characteristic, just like gender, race, or class, that decreases a woman's status even more than her gender. One reason why is because mothers are expected to carry that second shift, right? Performing slave labor, it drops your cultural status, and it also makes employers think, gee, if she has to spend so much energy on her family, will she really be the ideal worker for me? Another is that they are not viewed as individuals in their own right, but instead as somebody's mom. If your autonomy, if your individuality is diminished, then your perceived competence and authority are also going to take a hit. It's a big double standard, though, because by contrast, men are often rewarded with social approval and higher paychecks for being a, quote, family man. Professional women, in fact, often advise their peers not to put pictures of their families on their desk at the office, whereas men proudly display such photos. The upshot is that the psychological, social, and economic burden of parenthood is carried mostly by women. The maternal wall specifically refers to the fact that, compared with child-free women, working moms are less likely to be hired and promoted, and they make substantially less money. Overall, working moms make 60% of the earnings of working dads, whereas overall women make 80% of the earnings that men make in the United States today. An experiment demonstrates that the pay gap between working moms and working single women is larger than the gender pay gap. So Shelley Carell and her colleagues tested the maternal wall by using what's called an audit study. What does that mean? It means they sent out comparable but completely made up pairs of resumes, either two women or two men, to several actual employers, with the only difference being whether the applicant was a parent or not. They had a clever way of manipulating parenthood. The resume of the parents indicated that she or he was an officer in the Elementary School Parents-Teacher Association, whereas the child-free candidate was presented as an officer in a college alumni association. Everything else, their age, education, past work experience, etc., was equal across each pair of resumes. What were the jobs for? Mid-level marketing and business positions drawn from the Chicago Tribune. Each week for 18 months, the researchers sent out a pair of resumes, one day apart, for all the jobs that were listed that week, for a total of 638 jobs. Then they waited to see who would be called in for an interview. What they found is that real employers do discriminate against mothers. Child-free women receive twice as many callbacks as equally qualified mothers, 6.6% compared with 3.1%, which is a significant difference. Dads, however, received a significant bonus. They were called back 5.1% of the time compared with child-free men who were called back less than 3% of the time. Carell replicated these findings using a laboratory experiment, and I'll just show you the ratings for recommended salary. The scale, because this study was done with MBA students, is quite attractive. It starts at 130,000 and goes up to 160,000. But nonetheless, look at the huge hit that moms take when it comes to salary. They're down here towards the bottom of the pay scale, and everyone else is up here around almost 160, 150. And then we've got single, child-free men who are somewhere in the middle. That's a huge difference, and this is an experiment. Note that for the most part, women without children did well. They were second only to fathers, whereas mothers were penalized the most dramatically in terms of whether they would be hired, not likely, and if hired, how much salary was recommended for them, not very much. So the maternal wall has led to a revolution on the legal front as lawyers like Joan C. Williams have fought for women's rights. Joan C. Williams is a pioneer of this legislation. If you Google her name, you'll find a wealth of information about what she has called personal responsibility discrimination. And then she also has a bunch of testimonials from women who have hit the wall and paid a steep price for motherhood. But men, too, are just as likely to suffer when personal and work responsibilities clash. Despite federal laws, the Family Medical Leave Act, which was passed in the 1990s, it was passed to protect women who, workers who need time off to care for an infant or a sick relative. But when workers apply for benefits, they can be penalized by employers. That's against the law, but it nonetheless happens. And when it happens, you can sue your employer under what Joan Williams has called personal responsibility discrimination. Some of Williams' biggest lawsuit winners are, in fact, men who were blocked from their equal rights when a family crisis hit. It's also a basic human right to be able to spend time with a new baby or simply to have a balanced life between work and home. This idea that we should be slaves to our employers is just as costly for men as it is for women, and more men are waking up to this fact. For example, men today report more interest in raising children than in the past. And in some surveys, men and women report the same level of work-family conflict. And it's not that women's level of work-family conflict has decreased. That's remained steady as the years have gone by. It's that men's perceived conflict between advancing in their career and wanting to have a decent family life, that conflict has gone up for men. It's something like 48% of men were experiencing that the last time I looked at the survey work. And here's the thing, both genders strongly prefer egalitarian to traditional marriages. That's been going on for some time now, but it reached a peak with the millennial generation. So that's good news. And workplaces responding with family-friendly policies, they used to be called female-friendly, but now organizations are figuring out, no, this is great for everybody. They get the benefit of higher employee morale, and then when morale goes up, so does productivity, and burnout goes down. Burnout costs organizations untold billions of dollars. They spend so much time and resources training people to be excellent in their jobs that when they lose somebody to burnout, then they have to start from scratch, and they can never recover the costs that they sunk into that employee, right? So anything workplaces can do to decrease burnout is good for their bottom line, and it's also great for our lives. And men today are starting to demand changes in the workplace that will allow them to have better work-life balance. And that, to me, is the best sign of hope so far. So keep it up, younger generation.